What is up, everyone? I am joined today by Shaun Astorga from AMP Performance, AMP Clinical Mentorship. Obviously, y'all know me. I'm Dr. Ray Gorman from Engage Movement, helping you take some of your in-person processes online. But I'm stoked to be joined today by Shaun, who is somebody that we have kind of feel like known about each other, been connected in some realm for a while, but like really just kind of got like the conversation going maybe like 2.5 months ago.
Yeah, that's it. It's accurate.
And so tell them a little bit about yourself, your background, give us like a brief history on AMP and really like how that blended into what is now like a pretty well-known clinical mentorship program.
Yeah, sure thing. First, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to you in this context. Like Ray said, my name is Shaun Astorga. I'm a physical therapist by trade, but I'm mostly on kind of like the business and education side of things. I still maintain some clinical hours, so I can
Yeah.
speak educatedly to the things I'm teaching people. But yeah, I own a company called AMP Performance Rehab in northern New Jersey. We have two locations. Our main one is in Chester, New Jersey, and then we have a satellite location in Rockaway. And we are an out of network self pay practice. We've been full time probably about 3 years or so right now, and we
Nice.
really help with or work with the um, like health conscious, health like forward, active person who's kind of been through the ringer with like physical therapy, chiropractic, or pain in the past, and they haven't found resolution. Where typically they find their way to us, and we're usually able to help them out. During the pandemic, I was doing a lot of one-on-one mentorship with people who I just had known personally, and a lot of them had similar questions, and they were curious about the process that we use at AMP, or they had worked with me as like a patient or a client in the past, and they wanted to learn more about how they can do that with their clients. So ultimately, a lot of them had similar questions. So I kind of put it into a
Mm.
curriculum and created AMP's mentorship program. That's the second company that I own. It's called AMP Education. We are in currently, we just started our ninth round of the program, which
Nice,
is kind
man.
of crazy to think about. And yeah,
Congrats.
we're 150 plus people at this point from
Yeah.
around the world. And I don't know. It's cool to see how I'm sure we'll talk about digital stuff, but like it's cool
Yeah.
to see, right? How you can build that kind of network. And then it's just like people sending videos now of like in Germany, here's my client who I was able to help now, like and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff is just cool to see.
That's awesome. So there is some like digitalization of the process, it sounds like. One of the things that you had said that I think was like really important was the way that you described your avatar, right? Like your ideal client, like this health forward, health focused, active individual. Um, Expand on that a little bit for me because I think that that's something where a lot of people kind of struggle with of like we kind of get told that as healthcare professionals, we need to serve a certain demographic, we need to serve a certain client, we need to almost like be martyrs in the profession. And I think that where that leads a lot of people is to resentment of their career and
Yeah.
ultimately like burnt out because they're doing something for somebody else versus doing something for themselves. Like I know how I got to my version of that avatar, but I'd love to know how you guys kind of got to that version of your avatar.
Yeah, sure thing, man. So in spoiler alert, the avatar is really me, but
It typically is. It
yeah,
typically is.
yeah. In 2017, I suffered a pretty significant injury.
Yeah.
I had a concussion and an upper cervical injury, and I was just like not getting better.
Oh wow.
And I learned very quickly that there wasn't a place for someone like myself in the medical system. And what I mean by that is, I consider myself like a high achiever, right? From a
Hmm.
physical standpoint, like at the time I was running half marathons. I played sports in high school, college, and I was playing a lot of rec sports. But I was also very driven career wise.
Yeah.
Like building businesses and all that kind of stuff. Additionally, like my wife and I travel a lot. So we would go like hiking and we would like go on like long bike rides and like mountain climbing, like all this kind of stuff we just enjoyed doing. So after that injury, I was just met with a lot of professionals and specialists, and I went to pretty much every person you could find because I just was not getting better. But they all told me the same thing: like, you're going to need a new vision of what your life looks like. You're going to probably need to find another career. You're not going to be a physical therapist anymore because you physically can't do the things that you need to do, and all these types of things. And then that's what led me to just a bunch of I don't know, seeking answers that
Mhm.
people weren't giving me. And I ultimately, one of my mentors now, Bill Hartman, is someone who I had just known him prior to this, but I had worked with him. I started working with him from a clinical education standpoint, and he was able to help me. And I was like, well, actually, like, I'm able to get to a point where I'm able to do stuff now. So it's like, what's next for
Yeah.
me, right? And ultimately, I just kind of found the people that could help me, and we want to provide that service for people that are like me, because it's a pretty common story. If you're a physical therapist, so I'm sure you've heard it a million times. It's like, stop doing CrossFit, stop running, it's bad for your knees. It's like, well, no,
Yeah.
that's not true. What about all the people who do CrossFit and don't have knee pain or back pain, or the people who run and don't have knee pain or whatever? So that's really what led to us starting our practice. And then we ultimately just kind of, with the help of others, have figured out the best way to deliver that service, and that's kind of where we're at now.
Were you in a traditional setting, like a traditional outpatient orthopedic setting prior?
Yeah, so when I started my career, I was in a out of network, kind of like hybrid sports performance and
Okay.
physical therapy practice. But then I don't know if this is just New Jersey, but certain, like, Horizon is a big carrier in New Jersey,
Uh-huh.
and plan that like something like 60% of people had. They just
Right.
cut reimbursements while I was there. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount. I don't know that
R-
exact number,
right.
but we went from essentially 2 an hour to 3 an hour at that time. So
Even
even in
even
out of
billing
network.
even billing at a network. Yeah, that was going to be my question. It's
Yeah.
funny, and this is something that we can maybe touch on too, but like I think a lot of people who kind of go into the cash realm, I think eventually, maybe start to see like, oh, well, I could offset some of this lower volume with maybe taking, one insurance and become kind of a hybrid clinic. And the thing that I always talk to them about is like, in 3 years, do you think you're going to make more money from that experience or less? And so I think we all know, like I've yet to talk with a clinician who's in the cash-based realm or in the insurance realm and be like, yeah, and this year, like rates went up and our business actually got better, right? So it's just kind of funny, like the story is the story for a reason. And
Yeah.
we kind of share a similar journey into the realm. Like for me, you said it, when I tore my ACL, like at the end phase of rehab, I was like, why am I just like not doing this on my own? And that was like the planting of the seed for like, why wouldn't a PT just deliver a virtual program to a client who had the ability to execute it on their own? So like, it's funny that we kind of jive on that same experience. And for anybody out there listening, if you're having trouble identifying your avatar, like Shaun said, is probably a past version of you.
Yeah, well, even
Um,
on the insurance stuff, real quick, this is a
yeah,
topic I could ramble on
I
forever.
I hear you.
It's
I know.
yeah, but it's like I have experience working in like a high volume clinic as well after
Yeah,
right before I start AMP. But what I was gonna say is, like, we technically we use a consultant for out of network billing. So we still
okay,
like technically like take insurance, but just even the way that it is like deductibles are out of
sure.
control. So most people are just like self pay anyway. So for our perspective, it's like, yeah, we'll check your benefits. If they work, then we'll accept it. But we operate from the perspective that like insurance is going to be obsolete. Like
Yeah,
I want to be able to like have a customer journey that has that kind of mindset and thought process in place, versus like relying on the insurance. The insurance is kind of like a bonus for people like that, we can work with.
yeah.
That's it.
It's almost like, look, we'll submit it for you in some cases,
Yeah.
but what we can't guarantee is that they will find what we are doing, you know, justifiable for their reimbursement, right? Like, because sometimes you get beyond what insurance is going to reimburse for. And they're like, oh, well, we're not going to cover that, but the patient still needs your care, your expertise. And so I think it's really important to kind of cover that aspect. The other thing that I found that was super interesting about the avatar that you talk about, this health forward, health conscious, active individual, is where I started to identify that was I worked, one of my clinicals was actually an inpatient rehab. And I was like, yo, this is cool. Like nobody wants to get out of the hospital more than somebody who like an injury landed them there. So there was this super high level of motivation for that person to hit the goal. And when I was in the traditional outpatient realm, I didn't feel that. I felt like a lot of people were there because they were told they needed to be there, not because they wanted to be there. And when I transitioned into the cash based realm, it was like everybody here wants to be here. Is that something that you kind of seen as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, 100%. We have, and yeah, I'll say 100%. So like very much people are very much like they're very result driven
Yeah.
in this situation. They're like, I'm not saying that you can't be result driven or highly motivated in another
To-
insurance model. I don't want to
Not the
come off the wrong
argument
way.
for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to come off the wrong way because I know people hear these conversations and then their minds goes. But it's just that just seems to be the kind of trend. Like maybe it's the area we're in too. Like we're in
Yeah.
Chester, New Jersey, and up in Morris County. Like it just seems to be like the trend in this area. But it's also like we don't get much resistance even when people hear like our pricing. I don't know if that's just because like our sales process kind of accounts for some of the relationship building before we get to that point or whatnot, but or it's just like a shift in how people view healthcare these days. But we definitely see that with the motivation of our clients for sure.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, right? I think that what tends to happen is like this this persona that people think cash-based PTs have where it's like there's no point in insurance-based clinics and nobody there wants to work hard and nobody gets better in those clinics. Like that is just like not true. Like I have worked with so many excellent individuals who just crush the rehab process, but like the things that I was looking to get them back to generally like weren't really the things that my cash based demographic was coming in, right? Like my 65, 70-year-old lady who was looking to just like get up and down the stairs and walk around the block wasn't trying to hit the bottom position of a squat snatch. Like it's just a little different in the thought process of like what is like even like what is the equipment that we have available to work with these clients. Are you guys set up like what's like your clinical setup? Are you in a gym? Do you guys partner with a gym? Do you have a standalone space?
Yeah, so we sublease from our friend's gym. Yeah, both
Yeah,
of them are in a gym actually. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So we have a private like little space, like a
yeah.
separate room in the space, and then we have access to the gym and equipment that they have. We just kind of go wherever there's open space.
Yeah. I feel like that's I may be biased, but that's always been my favorite model. One, I like being around fitness and I like being around like the environment and the people and the community. So I love that.
You
Um,
said it, man. Like the environment, right? Like the
yeah.
people think of like the people we want to work with. Like when we worked in like the multidisciplinary facility, like I'd have people who followed from like when I worked in the sports performance facility. And
Hmm.
these are like athletes trying to get back to sport, but they walk into this very sterile looking
Hmm.
environment. You're like, all right, cool. Do they feel like they're at the right place? I don't know, but you come in here, right? You got like the music and like all that kind of stuff. So it kind of just goes with the type of like, person that
Yeah.
we're trying to attract.
Yeah. It's like, look, you can drop the weight in here. It's okay. Like it's
Yeah,
like we're
yeah.
gonna be good. Like drop it.
Yeah.
Like let's
We
go.
have
Let's
weights you
build
can
up
drop.
heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, You had said something that I think is a better segue into the way that we kind of had, the architecture of this call designed, but like let's kind of blend into like your sales process and how that works with your avatar and you said like you don't really hit a lot of resistance from your clientele even when you say your price. And I think like that probably wasn't the case in the beginning, right? Like you probably had to work through a lot of stuff, work through a lot of tweaks, work through like not just a sales process, but like an evaluative process, a clinical management process. And one of the things that I think happens when cash PTs, or excuse me, traditional PTs making the transition, try to go into cash PT is like they don't have this like next level of what the cash experience is going to look like. And so they come into a cash realm doing a traditional insurance based evaluation and they wonder why it's hard to then sell you know, a $200-300 visit, or even more so, a $2,000-3,000 plan of care. I talk about delayed gratification a lot, which is like not just like thinking of long term, but like you've got to be willing to suck for the first 5 times so the next 500 are easy.
Yeah.
Talk about your process a little bit with that.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Yeah, so I learned I'm like very comfortable with just kind of like trying stuff and seeing what happens. So like I
Mhm.
learned very quickly, first person who reached out, I'm like, oh, I need to have a solution for this because I couldn't really explain why at our time the prices were 250 for the evaluation. I couldn't really explain why in a way that
Yeah.
this person understood why this is more valuable than, you know, going to one of the 5 places you could walk to down the street.
Yeah.
So now what we kind of do is we have a lot of steps built in to the process that give a person an opportunity to get comfortable with us, get comfortable with our process, and get comfortable with the fact that we are likely the person that is able to help them. So if a person calls and reaches out, the first thing that our job is that we get back to them very, very quickly. So we have a CRM, right, that's in place that has some automation set up, and then
Mhm.
we can text directly to them to set up a time for them to call. So we have our what we call it a discovery call. I think that's probably pretty common
Yeah.
language for people,
Yeah.
where we just have kind of like a flow chart of things that we want to make sure that we hit. Like, are they like how they found us? One, like, so if it's like a Google
Sure.
ad or not Google ad, sorry, Google testimonial, I can at least speak to the testimonial or whatever it might be. Are they looking for the value of our unique solution? Are they calling because they want to get like a massage to their hip because they've had manual therapy, or do they care about the long-term outcome and result? Because those are two very different things. One is ideal, one is not ideal.
Mhm.
The physical problem, external problem, internal problem, like all typical kind of like sales stuff. And we want to make sure that we're able to hit all of those points. From there, our next step is to bring them in for the actual discovery visit. That is really one, to give them clarity on their situation, but two is also for us to hit any objections that they may have had during the discovery call. So
So both of those are free processes. One of them is you know, like a Zoom or phone call, whatever you structure. And then the second is like another free step
mhm.
that allows them to build more rapport off of discovery call 1 before you even make a pitch into an evaluation. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So during the discovery visit, like when they're actually coming in person, we just do like a mini assessment. We'll call it like your shoulder diagnostic
A
or whatever,
screen.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So something specific to them, we give it like a little name, you know. But yeah, so like they'll come in for that, so we can at least start linking in an objective assessment to their actual story and what they're experiencing. So that we take that process, and from there it's like initial evaluation, and then from there, like, let's get into the plan of care. So we
Yeah.
have a lot of steps built in. And at first I was like, okay, this sounds kind of like a lot, but we've seen like the results with it. Like, we don't really, like I said, get too much
Yeah.
resistance, and some of that could be quality of lead, of course, you know. But
Well, and you bring up a couple good points there. Number one is what I heard from your discovery call, the non in person, is that you're asking a lot of questions to determine what the client thinks is valuable. You are not saying this is why the way that we do things is valuable. Like, I think people get
yeah,
value misconstrued and like, here's all the reasons why my offer is valuable. And then somebody's like, oh, well, none of those actually resonate with me. So why would I like do that? So
yeah,
ask the questions, extract the value. That's key point number one.
yeah. I
Number
can't tell you what to value, right?
Totally.
You
And
tell
if
you
you
tell me what you value, and I'm not going to BS you. Like, either we could do it or we don't. You know, it's
yeah,
like that's kind of it.
and if you guess, you literally run the risk of like that being wrong. Oh, we do one-on-one care. Oh, well, cool. Well, I've had good success in group before. Like, okay, well, now I'm just behind the 8 ball, right?
Yep.
Um, Number two is at your discovery visit. And again, like I think that this works really unique for you. I don't think everybody else needs to run out there and do something like this, right? But what starts to happen is you start to build the gap of current state to where they want to be with an objective sense.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big thing for people too. Like when we talk about going and doing a movement screen somewhere or an injury screen, like really the goal of that is not to sell them into the next step always. It's just to give them like a snapshot of where are you right now, and is right now congruent on where you want to be. Now that from there, do you go straight into the sales conversation of um, evaluation plus plan of care, or is there another step where it is evaluation then determine plan of care?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both of those, and we're upfront with people even from the discovery call with
Mhm.
what people typically spend when they
Totally.
work with us. Yeah, we're up so we don't want sticker shock, right?
Yep.
Like, okay, this is great, holy crap, this is what it's going to cost. So they
Yeah.
know before they come in for the discovery visit, like, here's the price range I'm kind of looking at, right?
Yeah.
So again, we're just kind of qualifying a little bit, at that point.
Yeah.
So when the purpose of the evaluation is that we determine, okay, here's our recommendation for a number of like sessions for
Hmm.
the end goal is essentially what we do.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and I think too, like a question that I get asked all the time is like, what do I say when people ask, "Do you take my insurance?" What do I say when people ask, "How much does it cost?" Where do you guys put that portion of the conversation in your initial process? Like if it just comes up, like how do you handle it? And
Yeah,
do you have good success with how you handle it?
yeah. So I'm going to preface this with that we get a lot of referrals. So people kind of have they're coming
Sure, they
in with
kind of know.
that understanding. Yeah. So even when we
Yeah,
get Google, like we just started running Google ads recently, and we're still kind of navigating that process. But
yeah,
even when we get people from that question hasn't come up too often. Yeah, I'm sure it will though. It's like
yeah.
very very logical question to ask. So the way that we handle it is we almost like acknowledge it and say do we a little bit more about this, because it helps us kind of determine like so what, like if someone asked that and that's their first question, kind of almost like deflecting it a little bit till later in the conversation once we get a little bit of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly how I recommend doing it as well. I think we may have had a little breakup there, but I'm going to summarize what you said is um s- re-acknowledge it and then reposition it, right? Where I think a lot of people kind of hit a roadblock is they deflect it but don't reposition it. So like for example, it's like, "Hey Shaun, like totally respect that, price may be a concern for you. If it's okay with you, we'd love to talk about that at the end of the conversation. But the first thing that we kind of need to do is just like make sure we're the right clinic to help you. And then we can talk about options."
Yeah.
You said something else that was really interesting that I think is super important for a lot of people. Your reputation starts to decrease your resistance long term. So you have to kind of, I don't want to say fight for the the opportunity to help somebody when you're starting out, but it's not going to be as easy, sales consult number 1 as it is sales consult number 1000,
Yeah.
because there's going to be 999 other evangelists out there for you saying like, "Look, I don't know if they raised their prices, but like it wouldn't matter. You should do this." Right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really important thing that people don't look at. They see everybody else, like your clinic's 3 years old, you said. They see version year 3 of your business and think that that was version year 1. And like that is just not the reality.
That is not the reality. Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
you went through likely a lot of different scripts, a lot of different how do we say what we say? How many clients did we lose because of just the way that we were saying what we were saying? And then you learn from it. Like that's the big thing is delay that gratification so you can eventually learn from it.
100%, man. And it's like think about how long it took for us to become physical therapists. You're in school for like 20 years,
Yeah.
right? You think I'm going to know how to run a business just by opening the door? Like, no, it's like you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales, you have to learn finance, you have to learn all of these things. They're all skills, right? And they, build
Yes.
and stack on each other. But you got to, start and just like, hope you don't screw up too bad and kind of like
Yeah.
stay in the game long enough, right? To like figure stuff out.
Yeah, two things there. The one thing that I always say to PTs who are hesitant to learn sales skills is like, do you remember what your first evaluation as a student PT felt like? Do you even think about the steps of your evaluation now? Like, no, because you've just honed in the skill. You know, you can control the variables that you may encounter, right? The same exact thing is true in sales. There are just so many ways that a conversation could go, and you don't have enough confidence in navigating the unknown variables because you just haven't had the experience to it yet. That's as simple as that. Like
Yeah,
literally as simple as that.
100%. That's a good like reframe for people. Because people hear that word sales and they think like negative. It's like, no, it's like, I know I can help this person, but I need to, like, I'm not trying to convince them of that. I'm just trying to like show them that
Yep.
am that person, right? That's all it is. It's a conversation, you know?
You've got to sometimes convince them to help themselves,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like you've got to understand that a lot of times they're scared of the investment. They're scared of different. And when you understand how to use that to your advantage, as far as like, well, look, different is better, right? So if you wanted something non-traditional, don't you think maybe the payment structure would be a little non-traditional? And now they can rewrap their mindset around like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. In order for, AMP Rehab to operate the way that it needs to operate, it needs to potentially do things different, right?
100%. Yeah.
I had a second thing I was going to ask, but then we went off topic there, and I
Sorry.
now I just forgot. I forgot. Um, but super valuable. So with that, like talk about your clinical process. And you had said, you kind of nodded in agreement when I was talking about me being at the end of my rehab journey and kind of being able to be put on this virtual program. Talk to me about like your thoughts of like the evolution of the PT space, this push for people kind of taking their clients online, and not just in the way of like I'm capturing eyeballs from the internet, but like I'm blending my experience to just include a more efficient mechanism of touch points.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it is an inevitably going to
Yeah.
keep trending in this direction 100%. And when I think about PT, I think about it like PT is like basically it's just like a front end offer, right? So it's
Mhm.
like my marketing is all geared towards getting people in the door as a PT patient. But then I
Yeah.
get to a point and it's like, okay, what now, right? What's next from here? Just send them out into the world, like okay, cool. But also like from a business standpoint, it's like uh, I hate to put dollar on a person who's coming in with pain, but like lifetime value of a client, right?
Yeah.
There are ways that you can have a back end offer that is going to help keep them in your ecosystem longer. One way is digital. One would be like bringing in other services, maybe like acupuncture, massage therapy, or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
But what is really appealing about the digital aspect of things is that you have that ability, right, to keep the person in your ecosystem, in your network, and doing things that are meaningful, right, and consistent with their goal. Even if they're working with like a lot of the people we work with personal trainers, sometimes even one on one with a personal trainer.
Mhm.
Um, so it doesn't even have to be the same thing. Like I think people's heads go to like training programs, right, writing programs, but I don't want to program for people. It's like, well, you don't have to. You can, right,
Yeah.
like like
I'm
you
I'm
just
glad you
figure out
brought that up.
what works for the person, right? Like maybe it's
Yeah.
like I don't know, like specific warm up stuff to do so that when they train, like they feel good. I don't know. That's like an example. But I think that it just makes a ton of sense, right, to integrate these things. And I mean, you're seeing it with AI, right? You're seeing it with other things. It's just going to be a natural part of our world. It just kind of makes sense.
Yes, some of the trends that I see in a lot of the PTs that I talk to or I work with, especially the ones who are like, I want to try and integrate something digital on my own, is they all hit a lot of the same roadblocks. So one, I typically think that they're positioning it too late in the journey. And so it comes up as this feeling of like another sale instead of built into a specific part of the journey. Like I personally, when I had my clinic, I did it right at the beginning for a lot of people, just because that matched my clinical philosophy of what I thought that person needed. Number two is that it becomes, like you said, a training or fitness offer. And if we are working with health forward, health conscious individuals, they likely already have a fitness and training program. And so our goal is not to bite the hand that feeds and take away from the fitness professionals that are often referring to us, it is to create an offer that is supplemental to the fitness program, because in reality, no fitness program is perfect. Every fitness program has additional needs. And it doesn't matter if you try to combat that, like sometimes another set of eyes is that. And the third is making sure it's actually called something that differentiates it. So I stopped calling it remote programming and I started calling it a prescriptive exercise program. That is very intentional on the difference between what that person gets from their coach, and the value that we can provide as a PT. The last thing I want to touch on there and get your insight on is, you said something that was really good too, of like, one of the things that we talk about is the product or the experience that you're offering has to solve the problem that the client is experiencing. So when I look at lifetime value of a patient or a client, when they're in pain, like typically that's going to be that highest general price point, because that's where the most expertise is going to come in, right? That's why we paid a lot of money to go to PT school. As they start to feel better, we move into more of this, like, I call it like a reconditioning phase of reintegrating them back into their fitness routines so that they can get back to the things that they do. Do you guys kind of look at that in a similar way? Like, do you have that conversation with your staff, with your team, of like, this is when they're done with that offer and now it makes sense to put them on this offer, which is a little bit more palatable to the bank account?
Yeah, so we actually have this kind of baked into like the actual plan of care. So we currently don't have. I
Yeah,
think we
talk to me
yeah,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, sure thing. We may have talked about this briefly, but we don't have currently. We don't have like a. That's one of the problems we're trying to solve right now. We probably can help. Is like
I know a guy.
yeah, you know a guy. You got a guy. But like continuity, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, when we are speaking to a patient or a potential patient about right what the plan of care looks like with us, we
Yeah.
have it broken up in those exact three phases. Right. Phase one is right. Let's get out of pain, and that might be
Mhm.
like get some joint motion back, so that when you're doing the things you're doing, like you can actually do them without focally loading tissue or whatever it might be. Phase two is the reconditioning. We need to build up right strength, capacity, endurance, all these types of
Yep.
things, and then phase three is like your return to play, return to sport. This is where we're doing. Okay, you're a golfer. Like, here's where we're doing stuff that is like specific to the things you're going to need to golf or whatever the sport might be. So we kind of
Yeah.
have it baked into that process.
And what do you guys do for those last two? Like, what does that look like at AMP right now?
Yeah, it's all in person. Yeah, so
Okay.
it would be like honestly, probably indistinguishable from a training session for the most part, especially in that last phase.
Yeah.
There might be still like some I don't know, you're working back, building up capacity, right? And maybe something gets like a little irritated or something like
Sure.
that. So there might be like a manual therapy component, but that component is going to get smaller and smaller as we kind of progress along.
One of the things that I think people, just kind of from, my reputation and like the way that I've come through with such a heavy strength and conditioning background, is that like the offer that I talk about only applies to CrossFit athletes, power lifters, Olympic weightlifters. But the reality is, like, if I had a golfer, I could actually start to quantify and progressively overload the intensity of their sport through a prescriptive exercise program that would take place completely external to my facility, where it'd be like, okay, you know what, Shaun, today you're going to go hit a small bucket of balls and you're just going to do 50% wedge shots. Then it's going to be small bucket of balls, 100% wedge shots. Then we're going to move to short irons, mid irons, long irons, build volume, driver, go play 9. Like, there's so much scalability to this external to just the strength and conditioning part. But I think we both know, like, if you had a golfer, a runner, a triathlete, there would be a portion of it that you'd be like, if you can get into the gym 2-3 days a week, your longevity in your sport is just going to increase incrementally. So we have a really awesome opportunity to build a resiliency model around our clients there.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, one of the reasons that we changed the way our structure of our business and like that customer journey is like because of what you just said, right? We stopped
Yeah.
doing session by session because it's like people are coming to us for a long-term result, right?
Hmm.
But if they're like, I think I'm good after session 3, and then like 2 weeks later, it's like I went back to golfing and I was driving, I hit 100 balls, and now my shoulder hurts again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's not really fair on us as the practitioner, but it's also not fair on them as the client, right? So
Yes.
it's like if you want this end result, this is why we do things the way we do, right? It's like exactly that reason.
Yeah. And so just so everybody out there is listening, one of the things that I think both Shaun and I agree on is like there's a reason why we talk about selling the plan of care, not just selling sessions. And the way that we structure that is through packages, right? Like whatever
Mhm.
your duration of packages are. And, in our case, we add in that digital layer as part of that plan of care. But like literally, I used to use a return to sport graph and be like, how you used to rehab, this is probably what happened. Your volume was up here, you got injured, it went all the way down here, and then you felt better, and then you went back up here, and then you fell off this cliff, right? Now we can gradually reintegrate you. And this is why it takes 3, 6, 9 months, because the more high performance your goal is, the longer it might take us to be there, depending on what your current state is, especially if somebody is, like post-operative or like post traditional rehab, but now coming to us for that next level.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have a whiteboard in our office for that reason to kind of
You need
illustrate these
it.
things. But it's like not even like illogical. Like what like
No.
people see it and they're like, oh, actually makes a ton of sense because I would go to PT and then I would feel better and then I go back to the thing and it would start hurting again because I never built this up. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
there it is, right?
there's
Sales.
exactly. It's sales through education, right? It is
Yeah,
literally showing them like, here's where you are and here's where you want to be. And this is the gap to how we get you there. And this is why it's important that you commit to the process and it's not over when you feel better, because the weakest link at that point is going to be those tissues that need to then be reconditioned, right? I think we are in massive agreement there.
sounds like
Uh,
it.
yeah, like, but the other thing is, if you structure your clinical process well, it becomes your sales process, right? And in a non-salesy way, in a way that is like, that just makes so much sense. And I can see the path of how I get there. Why wouldn't I invest with this company? That's
Yeah.
that's the reality of what we're looking to get with sales. It's just the opportunity to help somebody.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's funny because like I do like I mean, it's technically like a sales call for like our mentorship program, like when someone applies. And people are they always comment, they're like, that was actually like so much more chill than I thought. And I was like, you're here because you want to join. I know what we have is gonna solve the problem. Like I'm not here to
Yeah.
convince, I'm just here to have a conversation and see where you're hung up and like if we're the right fit for what you do. Like that's really it.
Yeah, and I think too, one thing just to add on that is like, people are like, oh well, I don't want to like have to overcome these objections. Like really all you're overcoming is helping that person overcome their fear and concerns into the process. And like that's coaching, right? Like you're just coaching them through that experience of like, hey, have you ever thought that maybe like the way that you view your decision making process is something that has potentially held you back from actually getting the results that you want? And then they're like, you know what? I never looked at it like that. Like maybe it is. So if I want something different, I got to try something different. Cool. Like then let's try it. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised at what you get. Well, anything as we kind of come to a close here, anything that you kind of feel like you want to share, while you have the platform and can kind of speak to the audience, anything that you'd like to share?
Oh man. Not prepared for that one. Let's see.
What's your like unique message, right?
Yeah, so I am a big believer that, and you kind of just said this a little bit, is that we as the human tend to get in our own way a lot, right?
Mm,
And we have a lot of
totally.
self limiting beliefs wherever they come from, whether it's about whether it's about money, what we're capable of, all of these different things. And that's why I find a lot of power in like what you do with your business, like the mentorship program, the group programs. We're in a business mentorship program that has been exponentially helpful. And part of it is because, yes, you have someone who's doing what you want to do, teaching you how to do it, but you're also surrounded by people who are showing you what's possible, right?
Yeah.
They're here, you're here, right? And then you have people below, right? Where you're that person for them. So there is a lot of power in those types of things. And a lot of it really comes down to like the personal development, right? Because that's going to beget professional development. So whatever message you get from that's it.
No, you absolutely nailed it. Like the growth doesn't come from learning what to do. It comes from doing what you've learned.
Doing what
Right.
you've learned, taking action, man. Yeah.
So many, in the PT space, I feel like we see people get stuck in this over consumption, under implementation, and you have these amazing clinicians that, can't share their skill with the people that they truly want to share them with. And that's really part of the mission of Engage Movement, is like to make sure that those clinicians stay in the profession and just figure out a way that works for them. So I appreciate you sharing that message, because I think it's definitely something that we agree on, and I think we'll need to do a part 2 of this on just that topic. Shaun, where can people find you, and what's the best way for them to also reach out to you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we're probably the best way is probably Instagram. We're AMP_education on Instagram. DMs are me, so you'll the person is not a bot responding, or email SAUN@ampperformancerehab.com.
Awesome, man. I'll make sure that we put that in the notes wherever we post this. Shaun, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your expertise, and for sharing your guidance, your opinions on all the things. Truly enjoyed kind of getting to know you over the last couple months, and looking forward to keeping the conversations going, my man.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, brother.